Well, now we have the pleasure of solving an equation where a is not equal to 1 by completing the square. Now, this a represents the coefficient of the quadratic term. This is the quadratic term here. And we might also refer to that as the coefficient of the leading term, this 3. And we could also call it the lead coefficient. But if we're going to try to complete the square, we need to get this lead coefficient to 1. So again, we can add that this term, this 3, we might refer to it as the coefficient of the quadratic term. You may hear it said that it is the coefficient of the leading term or just the lead coefficient. But notwithstanding, we're going to have to divide this entire equation by 3 in order to get this to a single x squared. So when we do, then this is going to leave us with x squared plus 10 over 3x minus 8 over 3 equals 0. And 0 divided by 3 is just 0. Now, guess what this is going to also, we're going to use our skills with fractions, of which at this advanced stage you should know, and if you don't, oh well, you're going to get some more practice with it. All right, so just like what we did before when we were completing the square, we're looking at this linear term, and particularly that coefficient of the linear term is positive 10 over 3. And we're going to take this 10 over 3 and we're going to divide it by 2. And that's the same as taking 10 over 3 and multiplying it by 1/2. So dividing 10 over 3 by 2 is the same as multiplying 10/3 by 1/2. And when we do, that's going to give us numerator times numerator. 10 times 1 is 10. And 3 times 2 is 6. And I see that I can reduce that because both 10 and 6 are divisible by 2. To 5/3. Now that's going to be our factor, but as far as completing the square, we're going to take that 5/3 and we're going to square it. And so that's going to give us 25 over 9. All right, so in our equation now, we're going to take the 8/3 and we're going to add it to both sides of the equation and we're going to complete the square. And I'm consolidating a couple of steps. But anyway, I hope, because I don't have a whole lot of room to work with this. So hopefully you see what I'm doing. If not, by all means, please ask a question. So we got x squared plus 10 over 3x plus, completing the square, 25 over 9. And that equals 8/3 plus 25 over 9. What I do to one side of the equation, I must do to the other. All right, well, let's write this. We'll say x plus, and this is my factor, 5/3 times x plus 5/3. And if you're ambitious and want to FOIL that, you'll see that that comes to this portion of our equation, x squared plus 10/3 x plus 25 over 9. And then over here, well, if I'm going to add 8/3 to 25 over 9, I got to get to a common denominator. And I see that 3 times 3 is 9. So if I multiply 8/3 by 3 over 3, I can have a common denominator of 9. All right, so we're going to write this now as x plus 5/3 squared equals 3 times 8 is 24 over 9 plus 25 over 9. I'm going to draw a column here. And so then we got x plus 5/3 squared equals, let's see, 24 plus 25 is 49, is 49 over 9. Now we're going to take the square root of both sides, and when we do, Well, our square root on our left side here, our square root and our x plus 5/3 squared is going to cancel. It's going to leave me with just x plus 5/3 equals plus or minus the square root of 49/9. And the square root of 49/9 is going to equal, trying to make a mistake there, plus or minus 7/3, 7/3. And now we're going to set this into two equations and solve. So we got x plus 5/3 equals positive 7/3. And we're going to have x plus 5/3 equals negative 7/3. And we're going to subtract 5/3 from both sides. So x is equal to 7/3 minus 5/3. And this is just going to be equal to 2/3. 7/3 minus 5/3 is 2/3. And then on the right side of this, we got x equals negative 7/3 minus 5/3. So x is equal to negative 7, negative 5, negative 12/3. And we can divide negative 12 by 3, and when we do, that's going to equal negative 4. So our solution here, by completing the square, is negative 4 and then 2/3. All right, that was a lot of fun. I know you're going to enjoy this, and you're going to enjoy it so much that we need to do another one. Now, all of this is coming from page 259, example 5 in your textbook, but your textbook has an error because it's showing 3x squared plus 14x minus 16, and that's not going to work out to any kind of real number. And so obviously it's a misprint. It must be plus 16, and that's what we're going with because that's the one that's correct. The other one would give us an irrational number. And we're not going to be doing that right now. So again, I've got 3x squared plus 14x plus 16 equals 0. I need to divide the entire equation by 3. And when we do, we got x squared plus 14/3x plus 16/3 equals 0. And we're going to focus on this coefficient of the linear term, because that's how we're going to determine how we're going to complete the square. So I take 14/3, we're dividing it by 2. That's the same as 14/3 times 1/2. And 14 times 1 is 14, and 3 times 2 is 6. And I also see that I can reduce that to 7/3. Both 14 and 6 are divisible by 2. And that's going to be my factor, that plus 7/3. But then I'm going to square this 7/3. So we got 7/3 squared equals 49/9. And that's how we're going to complete the square. So let's see, we got x squared plus 14/3 x equals negative 16/3. We're subtracting 16/3 from both sides. Now we're going to add by completing the square. So I got x squared plus 14/3x plus 49/9 equals negative 16/3 plus what I do to one side of the equation, I must do to the other, 49/9. All right, well, I know what my factor is. I'm going to go ahead and factor this left side. So I got x plus 7/3 squared, x plus 7/3 times x plus 7/3. I kind of skipped a little step in there. And then I've got negative 16 plus 49/9. Well, to add those, I've got to get to a common denominator. And again, 3 times 3 is 9. So if I multiply negative 16/3 times 3/3, that would give me a common denominator. And when I do, I'm going to have negative 48/9 plus 49/9. So that's going to give us x plus 7/3 squared equals 1/9. And now we're going to take the square root of both sides. And on the left side, the square root and the x plus 7/3 squared is going to just result in x plus 7/3 equals plus or minus the square root of 1/9. Well, let's see. In the numerator, the square root of 1 is 1. And for the denominator, the square root of 9 is 3. So we got x plus 7/3 equals plus or minus 1/3. Square root of 1/9 is 1/3. Now we can set our two equations. X plus 7/3 equals 1/3. And second part, x plus 7/3 equals negative 1/3. Okay. Well, let's solve these. So first, let's subtract 7/3 from both sides over here on the left. So we got x equals 1/3 minus 7/3. So that x is going to be equal to negative 6/3. And so x then is just going to equal negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2. Well, there's one of our solutions, one of our roots, one of our x-intercepts, one of our zeros. Let's solve the second part of this. Again, we're going to subtract 7/3 from both sides. So we got x equals negative 1/3 minus 7/3. And so x then is going to be equal to negative 1/3, negative 7/3 is negative 8/3. And I can't reduce that any. And so my solution then is negative 8/3, negative 2. And again, if you were to graph that equation, you should be able to prove that those would be our two solutions. You might want to go to the calc feature and use the zero function. But on a test, here's what I want you to do. I want you to show your work. Don't rely totally on your calculator. Let your calculator be your confirming source. But you need to solve these algebraically because there's a lot of skills that you can get some practice in by doing so. So here we go, completing an equation with a not equal to 1.